So again, I always say I love Rockwool. Rockwool is one of those products that people really don't love unless it's working for them. So you either kind of love or hate it. When we go to prepare Rockwool, we have to take one extra little step, and I'm going to show it the same way as I am our little Jiffy pot. So soil, I'm going to take you over here a little farther. We're going to make up a solution. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But for Rockwool, essentially we just want to get this stuff wet. So I want to see it underwater if I possibly can. I usually make up the same type of recipe for a solution and be confident with it. But once we have a water solution, we can just mix that up and let the Rockwool soak in it. And I'm going to tell you, quite frankly, if you follow the method that I'm going to show you, you can just take tap water and let that soak for, let's say, 4 hours. If you want to do overnight, that's great, but don't do days at a time. Don't do an hour. If you look at this product right now, you'll see that it's all one uniform color. I've had this soaking for about 4 hours. If you just put it in fresh, I'm just going to grab a piece here. You'll notice it's quite a different color. As it sits and soaks for a little while, what you'll notice happens is all the little air pockets tend to dissipate, and eventually the whole flat will look exactly the same color. Now, if you're going to deal with peat moss and soil, and sort of make you chase me around here, Sean, these are a compressed puck that has a little piece in it, bits in it like aquazole. So what we do is we just allow them to soak. These have soaked for probably 45 minutes, and you can see that they've swelled right up. In comparison, I just put them in a little tray of water, and again, just straight tap water for this kind of thing. Don't even bother pH-less, this kind of thing for your soil. But I would tell you that if you're going to put your products in soil, such as the Grozyme or Super Thrive or any of these hydrogen peroxide products that I mentioned earlier, in the cuttings, I would tell you to simply put that in the soap water, and it'll draw right up and you're ready to go. Rockwool requires one extra little step. This is the part that most people tend to ignore or maybe just don't know about. I really just need to get it wet first. That's kind of the biggest step of all. Lots of different ways of prepping Rockwool, and you know, everybody ends up with their own little technique that says it's the easiest way. So I'm going to show you mine. Basically, we're going to soak this in some kind of solution in a tray, in a bucket. I don't really care. But we're going to take it out after our 4 hours. Like I said, overnight is fine. This is a little perforated tray we sell at the store. I just love these things. They're nice and heavy. So I'm going to put this one right on top, and I'm going to take it over to my laundry tub. So put it back to it. So I'm just going to set this on top of my laundry tub. Now this kind of thing, all we really need to do is take this bucket of water and rinse it right through. I pour the whole thing through that and make sure that we end up with the right pH. What we're going to do now, really, if this is the perfect bucket of solution with the correct pH and all our loving chemicals in there, we can essentially flush this flat, and by washing out all the old particles, we'll be confident that our new fresh solution with all our goodness in it will be left behind. Now, when Rockwool is at this point, when it's as wet as it could possibly be. Now, anytime, whether there's plants in it or before you plant, you should always understand that it holds a lot of water. If we could change the angle on this material and increase the vertical water column of it, it forces the water to the bottom. So I'm going to tell you, all we really need to do is grab one of our little cups. And if we want to trap a little bit of that water, and again, I'm going to say this doesn't have to be, it's a great idea to do it before you put cuttings in. But if you want to do this anytime when you have, you know, a full tray of cuttings, well, here's our sample water. Now we can check that with our pH meter or pH solution and make sure that this is going to be the perfect solution for our cuttings to thrive. Okay, so that's kind of the benefit of this type of medium is we can always check it, test it, and change it if we like. We can use a syringe, we can tip it up and catch that rainwater. But either way, I'm going to show you how we can check this little sample and make sure we're going to have total success. We need to prepare a bucket of water for our clones. This can be used for rinse water when you have cuttings in the material or just prepping it. If you're confident with the solution, it's so easy to put together that this kind of thing should be exact. We should probably maybe do it once and check the pH a few hours later, so that next time we can just put it together blindly. We don't have to go through such a chemistry type process and testing process, and I'll show you how easy I kind of do it. Now, I use the same kind of bucket all the time. Let's say we know this is going to be 10 liters of water, which this is 10 liters of water. So I'm simply going to fill up 15 milliliters of our A and B grow. Now I actually put B in there first. It really doesn't matter. But just put one in and give it a little bit of a stir, and then simply grab the same amount of the B product, or the A product in this case, and mix them together. Okay. Now if we're going to put other products in it, for instance, today I'm going to put in a few drops of Super Thrive. This product says 1 drop per gallon. Well, at a kiting stage right now, we can probably go about like that. So we'll probably end up putting about 10 drops per gallon in at that particular case. If you want to use Growzyme, certainly all we need to do is follow the label and this kind of thing. So this particular one, if you follow ceilings, it says 4 milliliters per gallon. So this particular thing is a gallon. So we're just going to actually give it about 4 to 5 mils. Now these kind of products, let's not knock ourselves out if we're off a little bit. The idea is we have not just 1 liter of water, we've got 10. So if we missed it by just a dash, I'm going to also use Voodoo Juice, and this kind of thing says right there 2 mils per liter. So again, this is going to be about 20 mils. There you go. So we've got a whole slew of different products in there. This is certainly all the things I like to use. Now the last thing we have to do is pH it. So if we're going to use any kind of product, that's great. Put it all in first, and remember we're going to pH it last. Now because I've done this so many times, I'm going to tell you that I have a little recipe for even acid, where it's nice to measure it out by the cap. Let's try 1 cap of acid for that 10 liters. Now I'm using a 20% acid product. Most stores will sell that. This is our own PHC product. And we're just going to give it a little stir. Now, I just took this water from the tap. It's certainly nice to make sure that it's up to room temperature before we put our cuttings into it. And when I say out of the tap, I'm going to say, hey, do we know what was good water? Well, I do. If you don't know if your water is safe to use, you're welcome to take it into a store. Or if you have some kind of meter product, such as a tri-meter, one of my favorites, what we can do is look at the food level, or the EC level, or parts per million level of the water before we start. So if you're in the country especially, I'm going to say hard water. If you have a water softener, the odds are you're going to find that there's a lot of particle or a high EC level in your water. If you look at city water, the EC level would be about 300 or 150 ppm. There's 2 different scales you can measure food from. So it's important to know what scale we're talking, and certainly take a look at your water. If it says that it's, let's say for instance, an EC of 300, well, if you look at a D.n.F flyer, or if you've tried city water, you would find that there's never any water in city systems that are going to be higher than a 300 EC or 150 ppm. That's kind of the point where I usually say, if your well water is twice as high as what city water would be, I probably just wouldn't use it. If it's just clones for doing soil type products, I'm going to tell you really just buy some bottled water. It doesn't have to be distilled water, but I'd say probably avoid the spring water, either city water, reverse osmosis, or distilled water. Any of those are great. If you're using a larger scale, you might want to look into an RO system. Reverse osmosis systems are very practical these days. For, let's say, around the $400 mark, you can have yourself a complete system that fills up a tank and shuts off, and it's very low maintenance and gives you great water from your hard water system. So tri-meters are certainly my favorite, where we have a pH meter, a food meter, and a temperature meter. So everything we need to really make sure we're good to go. If you're brand new to the thing, or doing soil, you might want to just deal with a solution kit that is quite inexpensive, and it will give you hundreds of tests. It's not near the accuracy, but what we're going to do is take a sample of water, and we're going to try it here right with this one. Now, something to keep in mind is we just put this solution together, so it's still quite cold. Because of many factors, I'm going to say the best thing to do is mix this up, let it sit for a while, make sure it's the right temperature, and then start checking our pH. If you check it beforehand, like we are right now, you're quite commonly are going to test that it's too acidic. And then you come back in a couple hours, and sure enough, it's just the range you want, or let's say much higher. Now, what we did is took a sample of water. As long as it's a nice clean cup, we're going to take some dye. I'm going to see if I get one drop to go. Oh, there, one drop. Now, we can be all scientific. A little shake. Now, sure enough, just like I said, if we compare to our scale, this is 4, 5, 5.5, we're going to try to get a solution that's about a 5.5. Now, I just tested this, and it looks pretty much like it's a 4. So what we're going to do is we're going to let this sit for a little while and certainly double check that. Now, if it is that we put in too much acid, well, that's a big boo-boo. What we can do is use water and dilute the solution out a bit. That will raise the pH. We can also add pH products to raise it back up if you like. But what we would find is that my recipe might just work out after a few hours. So we'll wait and see. But certainly you might find that this is a bit of a painful process the first time. It's worth kind of playing with it the first time or two, and make sure you're confident with the values. Then you can kind of throw it together just like I did. Of course, I'm going to check it before I use it, but we might find that this solution actually doesn't work out too bad in a few hours. Once it warms up, it mixes together. I always explain it like, it takes a little while to really put a good batch of pancakes together. We're going to mix everything up. We're actually going to let it sit and rise for a while before we start cooking it. Okay? Let's see. Spending quite a bit of time on this prepping of Rockwool. It's always one of the biggest misconceptions. Of course, the company wants to tell you how easy it is to prep, and for some it is. But I usually stress this extra couple steps just to make sure that we're going to have the greatest success. So once we've soaked it for a few hours and we've set the tray in a situation where it can drain, we're simply going to take our solution that has that pH of about 5.5. And I'm going to say really, the game of Rockwool is the 5. So we don't want to start with a solution that's 6. It's just going to go higher over time. This is the biggest confusion between soil and our Rockwool. With our soil, you might have noticed that I didn't even mention about pHing it. I'm not too concerned about it. The idea is that we're using good water, and with a few products, it's going to be just slightly acidic. And Rockwool is an inert medium, as opposed to our peat products or soil is an acidic medium. So when we put the water into our Rockwool, from this point on, likely the pH is going to slowly rise over time, as opposed to when we deal with our peat pucks, over time the pH is slowly going down. So with Rockwool, I'm just going to say, hey, let's make sure we have the right pH. Personally, I just take the whole bucket and give her a good rinse. She's good to go. If at any point, I kind of mentioned this earlier, at any point you want to see what the pH of that is, whether it's full of cuttings or seeds or not. If there's enough moisture in there and you could possibly tip it up and trap a little bit of that water coming out of there, you can always check the pH of that and make sure it's correct. Okay, so that's our little sample water, and we're going to actually test that in a minute. So this flat is all ready to go, and next thing I'm going to take you into our little mum room, and we're going to start doing some cuts. So this flat's all ready to go. Now the other one we had set up here right beside me is our soil situation. So basically all I did there is I let them soak in a solution that had our nutrient in it and our Grozyme and Super Thrive. The only real difference is I didn't even bother pHing this. I did make sure that it was good water. In our own little shop here, we've got an RO system that's sitting right beside me at the sink. So we've got kind of a pre-filter system that just simply hooks into a tap. It goes through the filter system into our reverse osmosis. Now this particular machine is a Merlin. These ones do about 700 gallons a day, up to, sounds like a big value, but I'm going to say, hey, you know, if you take a look at this tap, this is about how fast you can produce water. Okay? So this is kind of a large system compared to some of the other ones I sell. And, you know, some find it frustrating and it takes a long time for it to produce water. So it's nice to have a good sized system. Something like this put all together, this is probably a $1,000 system. So it's not inexpensive by any means. Like I said before, smaller systems are probably $400. But this kind of thing, hey, you can fill a bucket of water pretty quickly with this. If you need larger volumes, you know, you can get it more quickly. Any of them will do the job as long as you can wait the time. So we've got our solution in here, and all I'm really going to do is somehow I'm going to drain that out. Now again, I probably should put that in the lattice tray, but we just have to get rid of the excess water. We want to make sure when we put this thing, these components together, that there's nothing but the water that's actually held in the Jiffy. Get that right out. And that's our little bags of soil. So these are all ready to go as well. But these little inserts are kind of nice. They hold them in place. Obviously they're not strong enough to hold them right up, but they, once you get some plant matter in them, at least they're all pointing in the direction. Take her on in.